This video is sponsored by ExpressVPN. In my eyes, perhaps one of the best, most underrated science fiction films of the last 30 years has to be 1993's Fire in the Sky. Based on the book by the real-life alleged abductee Travis Walton, Fire in the Sky tells the story of 6 loggers working in the Arizona mountains, who one night believe to have witnessed a UFO that subsequently abducts one of their group, Travis Walton. Upon returning to town traumatized by the bewildering and frankly unbelievable incident, the 5 men quickly find themselves suspects in Travis's disappearance, as the out-of-town Lieutenant Frank Waters and eventually the entire town itself begin to point fingers at the men for having been involved in potential foul play. For this one, I highly recommend you go in blind because while it's easy to dismiss it as another generic alien abduction film, the extraterrestrial elements are a surprisingly small part of the overall story, and like me, it's even better if you know nothing about Travis Walton's story. Instead, it's better to treat the film as a captivating character study, focusing on loyalty, doubt, skepticism, mob mentality, trauma, and survivor's guilt that takes on more of a mystery-esque procedural structure, even bordering on courtroom drama without the actual courtroom. Although the film is probably most famous for when it goes total Jacob's Ladder nightmare mode in its harrowing 20-minute long finale that details Travis's alleged abduction and subsequent probing in a repulsively and distressingly detailed way. But trust me, we will come back to that abomination when we get past the nuances around it. Now, like with any of these based on true story films, I'm not here to talk about the actualities or give my perspective on the truth. I'm just here to recommend the film because that's all I know how to do. Look, you don't come to me for the hard-hitting commentary, it's just not my jam. So if you are curious on the reality of the situation, there is plenty of material out there, you just gotta go find it for yourself. As always, as we go along, make sure to leave your thoughts or recommendations for future videos in the comments below, along with a cheeky wee like and subscribe if you're into that kind of thing, maybe a wee pledge on Patreon, and just before we dive any deeper, here is a quick word from this video sponsor, ExpressVPN. If you're a horror fan like me, it's very likely you've binged pretty much every great scary film on Netflix, and as such you end up with diminishing returns despite the costly subscription fee. However, did you know that with ExpressVPN you can unlock an even wider variety of films and television shows not available in your country? For example, here in the UK, if I switch to a Canadian location using the ExpressVPN app on my computer, phone, or in this example, my tablet device, after a quick refresh, Netflix Canada gives me access to The Thing, 30 Days of Night, Evil Dead, The Ring, and just an insane collection of horror classics to keep me busy and make my service subscription worth every penny. Without ExpressVPN, it's like going to a library filled with a diverse collection of books, but only being allowed to read celebrity biographies. The point is, ExpressVPN is about giving you unrestricted access to get the most out of the services you work hard to pay for. ExpressVPN has received consistent acclaim by tech critics, gives you 24/7 customer support, takes mere seconds to install on your favorite devices, and if you still feel it's not for you, they also provide a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you have nothing to lose. Simply click the link in the description box below or go to expressvpn.com/Ryan and find out how you can get 3 months free. And now, back to the video. You could say Fire in the Sky is like a great episode of The X-Files, not actually part of The X-Files, because not only did it just predate the juggernaut of a show by mere months, but it's also been said by its creator Chris Carter that Fire in the Sky is the reason Robert Patrick was eventually hired to replace David Duchovny. However, it's a shame they didn't give him much to do on that show because holy shit, Robert Patrick is the emotional driving force of this film.
You know, I don't get this. My My best friend has disappeared. God knows where he is, and all you can think about is money.
We all know and fear him for typically playing cold, dispassionate villains, especially the T-1000, but here he is heartbreaking and gives one of the most painfully underappreciated performances that deserved much more attention than simply a Saturn nomination. The dude deserved an Oscar nom for this, but we all know how that works.
We've been telling you the truth since the beginning, and now we're ready to prove it. We'll take your damn lie detector test. You set it up, we'll be there.
What's significant about his character is that he's the one arguably left most profoundly affected by everything that happens, even possibly more so than Travis Walton. Not only does he feel tremendous guilt and responsibility for leaving his best friend behind, assuming he was dead, but he becomes increasingly estranged from his own family as his pleas for people to believe him consume his mental health to the point he becomes a recluse. For him, one day life is happy and normal, and the next he's being crucified by a humble community turned hostile towards him, labeling him as a liar and murderer, eventually leading to a self-fulfilling prophecy that leaves him literally outcast from society.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
He's presented as a compassionate man shown little in return, and willingly stands up for himself and the entire group to do the perceived right thing. However, ultimately, it's just never enough for these angry people who want justice without trial, making his efforts at redemption feel just as impossible as the way the town treats his story.
You're saying that you're no longer willing to cooperate?
That's all we do is cooperate, and all we get back from you is grief.
So going into the structure of the film, another way to look at it, since I can't escape the X-Files comparison, is what if Jose Chung's From Outer Space was played without humour? It basically frames the story from dubious perspectives, as the film never confirms what actually happened on the night in question, because the reality is we just do not know the definitive truth. When the haunted, disheveled men arrive at the bar in the beginning of the film, their questioning by police is shown through subjective flashbacks that naturally take on the form of an unreliable narrator. But here's the interesting thing, that's not to say that they're lying or being deceptive by any means, because since the film very explicitly puts us in their shoes, it's easier for us as the audience to buy into their honesty and sincerity. In the film's world, I don't doubt what they're saying, I somewhat believe them because I was effectively there, but in a cinematically hypothetical sense. However, to other people, how can you buy into something so extraordinarily far-fetched without proof? In other words, the unreliable narrator isn't really for us, although it does exist to avoid inadvertently siding with the perspective that UFOs are real, it's more so for everyone else who wasn't there. The film remains incredibly neutral on the matter. Anytime it shows us something considered questionable, it's always framed from one character's perspective to cast doubt on its validity. As such, despite all that the film shows us to make it easier to empathize with the group's perspective, you are still made to inherently question everything you see. Is what they're saying embellished? Maybe they were drunk or on hallucinogens or something, or maybe it is all a nefarious hoax and I've been deceived this entire time.
Tell us, I thought you don't know where he is.
I lied.
The point is, regardless of what you personally believe, the movie itself deliberately never picks a side. There is never any certainty, and as such, the emotional core of the film rests on watching these 5 supposedly innocent men being backed into an isolated corner, ostracized by their community and loved ones as they desperately try to tell people the truth. But the truth ultimately feels so empty without something physical to show for it. The thing is, the story doesn't really care about the truth, it cares more about the sociology around it. As such, while we do feel sympathetic for these men being accused of murder, we also come to understand why the town reacts the way that it does, because, after all, the story just sounds way too bizarre to sound true. Now, by this point, I'm sure some of you are probably thinking, if this is supposed to be Travis Walton's story, then where the hell is Travis Walton? Well, he does eventually emerge late into the second half, kickstarting an entirely different conflict over his side of the story. However, just before we get to it, it's best to understand how the film establishes Travis as a character from the perspective of his best friend Mike Rogers. Travis is essentially that one innocent friend everyone has who's a passionate and excitable personality, but also a little bit of a pain in the hole. Now, don't get me wrong, he's a really likable guy with this carefree, happy-go-lucky spirit, but like with the self-fulfilling prophecy Mike experiences when labeled an outcast, Travis's hyperactive and unrealistically ambitious personality, compounded by his desire to start a company which Mike doesn't believe will work, becomes an undoing of sorts. In other words, because Travis is known around town as a bit of a daydreamer, it makes it easier for people to label his account as exaggerated and suspect.
What's your point? You're a dreamer.
Like Mike, by the end of the film, Travis is practically an entirely different character than the one established, making it tangibly believable that something clearly happened to the guy. When he's finally discovered late one night, shocked, bruised, bollock naked, and being ironically probed by eccentric UFOologists, it's hard not to feel sorry for the guy. That is, until Lieutenant Waters turns his antagonistic judgmental attention to Travis, insinuating that he made the whole thing up for fame and fortune, but doesn't have the power to, well, probe any further into Travis' story now that he's been found. This leads us to the infamous alien abduction scene, which will go down as one of the greatest, most horrifying pieces of sci-fi cinema you will ever witness. Spoilers, brace yourself. Now, if you know my channel at this point, I won't be giving you a linear breakdown of Travis's big abduction scene, because doing so would be a massive disservice to how absolutely bonkers it is. However, I will say that the best way to describe it is like taking the hysteria of Jacob's Ladder, molding it with the slimy rebirth scene from The Matrix, add in that eye injection anxiety from Dead Space 2, and then splash in a bit of Cronenberg's Videodrome and maybe just a hint of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. That's basically what we're dealing with. It's essentially a 20-minute long short film to be admired purely on a visceral level. In fact, it doesn't actually make a hell of a lot of sense, which is entirely the point and only serves to make it even more effective. On the one hand, it's a personal nightmare where we can do nothing but plea for Travis's safety, and on the other hand, it adds a necessary obscurity to make it seem doubtful and fictitious. But what really cements the scene is D.B. Sweeney's performance. When he arrives home to a welcome party, he's so distant, traumatized, quiet, and in utter disbelief, as if part of him is probably still lost wherever the hell he was. Of course, there is an argument to be said that it is tonally out of place with the rest of the film, and actually might pull people out of the grounded nature of the story, but it was the kind of payoff I was waiting for, and it does deliver on being the cold, sinister counterpart to Spielberg's more, forgiving approach to extraterrestrials. Although, fortunately, the film doesn't end on a downer like you might expect, because sometime later, Travis seems to have rekindled his humanity and started a family, and then decides to reconnect with Mike after they fell out on the night Travis was discovered. It's a heartfelt closure to bring normality back to what is quite a harrowing experience for these characters. There's a genuine sense of healing, a hope that things can only get better, and this is all demonstrated in the unity these two friends truly share for each other, along with those who cared for Travis each step of the way. And that concludes Fire in the Sky. I really hope everyone has been enjoying the videos so far this year. I've been trying to work out some internal anxiety issues that have really taken a damper on the video making process, but I really hope I'm still delivering on quality horror reviews. But anyway, until next time, stay safe, stay away from fires that seemingly float in the sky, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye!